generally agreed upon within Christian circles that there are certain words that ought not be used because they are considered naughty, vulgar, sinful, an inclination towards fleshliness. For example, Christians should not use the so-called N-word. Christians should not use the so-called C-word. Christians should not use the F-word. But tonight we're going to use another word, and we're going to make mention of it over and over and over again. A word that is probably the most persona non grata amongst Christian circles. Is the H word, ladies. Some of you are quivering in your pants. Some of you might have urinated just a little bit, saying, what is wrong with these two? How is it possible that they are going to breach it? How is it possible that they are going to breach the morals that have long defined the Christian church, and they are going to speak about the word and the concept and the sentiment that ought not be named in Christian circles? We're going there and more. We're going to speak about hatred.
I hate that. I just hate that. I'm sorry. Can't help myself. I just hate it.
We're going to talk about
I hate
hatred.
the fact that only a few join me in hating.
Yes. That's right. Welcome each and every one of you to this new edition of Irrespective.
Don't you hate the people that don't hate?
I absolutely hate those people. They're deplorables, to use Hillary Clinton's words. My name is Gio. It will always be Gio. I'm not changing my name. This is my father. I'm his co-host. He's mine, Jesus.
Didn't you tell me once you hated your name?
No,
or I'm just making stuff
no,
up.
I think you're just making things up to make this thing more hilarious than what it is. That's right, folks. On this edition of Irrespective, we are going to overturn what I think at this point would be centuries of dogma within conventional Christianity. But as our tagline implies and explains and explicates about us, we basically challenge conventional Christianity because there's many things within
I hate
conventional
dogma.
Correct. That deserve
I
to
hate
be
dog and ma.
Right. There are many things about conventional Christianity that simply don't stand biblical scrutiny, and we are here for it. We are here to challenge it, and we hope that you would join us. Right. More specifically, we're going to talk about.
Do you hate him back?
Oh, absolutely. That's, some would say that that's the natural way of the world. Now,
people know we're teasing, right?
it's kind of amazing that in this day and
hate
age
the
we
fact
have
they
to
can't pick up on the fact
can't
that-
pick up on the fact that that's
we're
the case.
teasing
By the way, good evening to those
Do you
of you
hate
that
the
are,
fact that I continually interrupt you?
I'll tell you one thing. One thing that it makes it impossible to even engage in these conversations is this generation's lack of awareness of common sense and sarcasm, which characterized American culture up until about 3 minutes ago. But now it seems that even these jokes, which should be funny, now they can't even be said anymore because the woketards among us and others have taken all the fun out of the room. And this includes a lot of Christians, by the way, that have joined that band, and one has to do something to get their heads
So you
checked.
hate the fact that comedy, funny things, funny people are being removed.
And I'm being completely honest here. I actually detest that. Again, we're beginning to challenge the very essence of what many Christians have come to believe and have been indoctrinated with, that hatred in and of itself is something that Christians must reject. But we're here to tell you on this edition of Irrespective that that's not actually the case. We actually find plenty of text in the Bible, Old and New Testament, that says that hatred, righteous hatred, is actually a Christian thing.
So we have teased enough to the point that you probably hate this edition, but we beg you to take a look at Romans 12:9. Tonight's message, pastoral care, advice, is something that I'm sure it has happened to you on many occasions. You read a verse, you read it 100 times, and it doesn't hit you as hard as that particular time where all of a sudden you feel like, or you perceive that the Holy Spirit is telling you, stop and take a look at it. So I was writing the thank you letter that we always thank, or we always send to people that help us financially. And I was inspired to write a little something about Romans 12:9, and all of a sudden it just hit me, hate what is evil.
Yep.
And it just started, I'm sure it's happened to you, a whole thought process that for a second, people call it, I was lost for a second. No, I was found actually for a minute where you go into this place of thought and meditation and you're thinking about the Word of God and all these verses hit you. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, look at this fantastic verse, these fantastic words in the middle of the chapter, Gio, that deals with the renewing of the mind.
Right. It's there and it can't be ignored.
And you can't push it away. Well, what does it say? Love must be sincere, NIV. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Wait a minute. Did you read what I just heard you read? Yes. NIV. Love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Let's go to the New King James Version. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. Love must be free of hypocrisy. Detest what is evil, cling to what is good. In other words, all of these interpreters agree that there is hate involved
Yes.
in the Christian walk.
I think it's important to demarcate what we're teaching here from what is typical Christian teaching and has been typical Christian teaching for decades now, dare I even say centuries. There's a phrase that has become very popular to the point where Christians repeat it reflexively without thinking upon what it is that they are proclaiming. Christians will say, we hate the sin, but we don't hate the sinner. You love the sinner, but you hate the sin. Here's the thing. The waters become a bit murky when you understand that it's the person who is committing the sin. And I know that opens up other implications where suddenly you have to grapple with what those extensions and those implications are. But I don't think we need to fear it because, number one, we have to understand that a lot of the programming, and that's exactly what it is, a lot of the programming that has been dealt to many Christians in this generation actually comes from a place that isn't biblical. It comes from a place of organizational churchianity, as some have called it, where they're trying to appeal to the masses. It's the typical attention merchant marketing tactic. We want to go out and we want to appeal to the most amount of people possible, so don't use this language, don't use this phrase, stay away from this. And yet what they end up doing is undercutting, if you will, the legs from biblical teaching in these aspects for the sake of reaching more people. In the modern age, it was Rick Warren. At another point, it was, I forget the name of this other church in California, Willow Creek. I forget. Hybels, there we go. Bill Hybels was also a proponent of that whole thing. And then that model began to spread to
Piper.
Exactly.
It's been quite a few.
It's been quite a few.
The whole TBN crew.
Exactly. It's been quite, the thing has been spread out, and smaller churches began to pick up on that because a lot of local pastors and ministers and seminarians were listening to what these people had to say from their pulpits, and they adopted the same model. And it was that led to Christians being browbeaten into being taught hatred is not part of the Christian ethic. Hatred is not something that the Christians should experience. However, interestingly enough, we find texts from the Old Testament on where God not only expresses his displeasure of certain people, but he actually goes on to state that he hates
He abhors
certain
them. He
individuals.
detests them.
Exactly.
I grew up, my first Christian steps embraced the following doctrine. There is no place for hatred. And this is why in my thank you letter, I said, beginners in the Christian faith are taught to believe that the New Testament leaves zero space, no space for hate. But then you bump into Romans 12:9 and you go, wow, actually there is room for hatred. So God is not prohibiting it. God is placing it in the proper place. Furthermore, let me throw this into another spin zone that liberals hate, but we will spin it and dry clean it for you to the point that you'll be able to understand it and embrace it. We are created in the image and the likeness of God. And as I read through the Bible, I see, and you were just alluding to it, that God hates.
Yes.
We're going to visit a verse in the book of Proverbs in just a few minutes where it says the Bible that God hates these six things, and 7 of them he detests.
An abomination.
And you go like, wait, what? You heard me clearly. God hates. So if God hates, that means that we who are created in his image and according to his likeness We can hate. It's just to place it in the proper content, in the proper place. And when you do, you're okay with God. Furthermore, you're manifesting his image. I'll give you one example. And this will lead to us tackling the question that we presented: why don't you hate the things you should be hating? For example, we should all be hating the fact that men are trying to make themselves appear like women, like they're women, and participating in women's sports. Why don't you hate that? Well, I see these people as enemies and I'm called to love them, so I really can't hate that. Well, maybe, just maybe, there's an indifference in your posture that God abhors. Or maybe in the background, there's a child, a grandchild, a niece, a nephew who is flirting with these things, and now you can no longer abhor these things that you know are evil and that you should be detesting them, hating them, but you don't. So you have decided to please the people instead of pleasing God. So if you think we're wrong, by the way, call us out. Show us the verses where what we are saying is incorrect. If God hates, and again, I can take you to many verses where it's clearly provable that God hates. He hates certain things, certain actions, certain conditions. If he hates that, why can't I? Furthermore, I should and I can and I will, because I am created in his image and in his likeness.
There's a couple of things that I also would like to expand on what I was saying earlier, because one of the things that we attempt to do through Irrespective is to detangle the inconsistencies that are brought about by conventional Christianity, which leaves Christians in a wicked space. And by wicked space, I mean it's these spaces where they are holding on to two contradictory ideas that when they are confronted with them, they've even come to think that now denying those two contradictions is a denial of God himself. But the problem doesn't lie with God. The problem doesn't lie in the scriptures. The problems lie in men's interpretations and how they have made these flawed interpretations of biblical doctrine as infallible. And now many Christians don't even want to broach those things, and this is one of those topics. Let's consider this for a quick second. I visit Webster's American Dictionary, the 1828 version, not the modern versions, which have just done away with Noah Webster's great work. And he defines hatred in the following manner: great dislike or aversion, hate, enmity. Hatred is an aversion to evil. Webster was a Christian, and he gets many of one of the things that made his dictionary so fantastic is that in many of the words that he would define, he would give you the biblical text in the King James Version where you can find that in a context so as to make the definition even clearer. So we understand that Webster was a man that was influenced highly, of course, being a believer, by biblical Christianity. Notice how he inserts this into his definition of hatred. Hatred is an aversion to evil and may spring from utter disapprobation, as the hatred of vice or meanness, or it may spring from offenses or injuries done by fellow men, or from envy or jealousy. Notice that he's demarcating a difference. One where an injustice is done on one, which one would think that that's a natural reaction to that, because you don't want to have an injustice done unto you. You want justice done. But then he also demarcates that by saying from envy and jealousy, which are sins, in which case it is usually accompanied with malevolence or malignity. So even in Webster's definition, he is drawing a line of separation between one type of what I would call righteous hatred and the other one which he would call sinful hatred. Now, let me explain this a little bit further.
It's the same with the Greek, Joe. I'm sorry to interrupt. But the Greek word that we translate hate, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that Greek word, but it means to utterly hate. You guys can do that research on your own time. We have just a few minutes to share these ideas and these thoughts with you, but it means to utterly hate. So you can see where Webster is picking up his information from.
Right.
He was a very knowledgeable man, and he laid things down very clearly so that all could understand it. We're talking about utterly hating evil.
Allow me to, and this is the point I wanted to get to. Many Christians have had the following idea installed in their minds by popular teaching by many other pastors and Christians and whatnot, and that's been disseminated to the point where it's become the norm. You see, if you hate the sinner, what in essence you're saying is that you desire and you're going to act upon with malevolent rage against that person if you hate them. That is what is interpreted typically by saying, if you say that you hate a person, that's the intention. But notice how Webster himself, he says, no, there's actually, Again, I'll use the word of demarcation. There's a differentiating factor between one where an injustice is done to one and you want to see justice done, but it isn't done immediately. Well, Gio, some might say, but doesn't Paul say that we ought not avenge ourselves, that we should leave it to the Lord? He does say that, but interestingly enough, you find in the book of Acts how Paul, in certain instances, the very same man who tells us, don't avenge yourselves, let the Lord do it, in many instances, he actually sought to avenge himself from the injustice that the Jews were doing to him while he was ministering.
Plus, if you think about what he said, you must arrive at the conclusion, there is no other conclusion, that deep inside, even if you're leaving it up to God, you still want vengeance.
Yeah, folks, let me put it more plainly for you.
Am I wrong on that?
No, you're well said. Let me put it more plainly. How is it possible that you are not to abhor the person whom undertakes evil, especially when it is a machinated, especially when it is a premeditated evil? How can you not go to hate that person and what they're doing? And yet we find this fuzzy middle ground, which doesn't make any sense logically, that you hate the sin, but you don't hate the sinner. Gio, and I know what you guys are thinking. I can read the thoughts of the audience. Gio, but aren't we called to love our enemies? Well, let me ask you a question. What does that love entail? And what does this hatred that we're supposed to reject entail? Again, the cartoonish image of righteous hatred is as follows. This Christian is going to let the flesh get the best of him, and now he's going to do things that in essence are fleshly. So it's best for us just to stick with the loving the enemies aspect, because in essence, and here's the key, here comes the problem. Loving one's enemies, according to the seeker-friendly church, means the following: you tolerate and even endorse not only the person who engages in evil, but the evil itself. Who manifests that? How do they say it? Have we not seen for some time now that within church circles, you're supposed to say of people who consider themselves LGBT Christians, which that is an oxymoron if I've ever heard one. But anyways, they'll say you're supposed to love these people, just show them, share compassion and empathy for them, even though they are willfully violating one of the most sacred commandments, as it were, with respect to personal issues, and more specifically, sexuality. Just to give one example.
So I already gave one example. Why not detest the fact that this guy is making a new image for himself? He's still a guy. He has a prostate. He needs to take care of that. Otherwise, he's going to have issues later on in life. But he wants to beat up on women in some sports sporting competition. One example. I'm supposed to love him. I'm supposed to say, I'm going to love you to the point that I will allow you in this event beating up on my 2 daughters or beating up on my granddaughter. Come on. Really? Seriously? But I'll give you another example. Let's say that we find out there's a group of people who are worshiping Satan, and all of these kids that have been disappearing, lo and behold, they have been sacrificing these kids to Satan.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to say, oh, we love these Satanists that are doing these things, therefore, we just want them to stop killing babies. We want no justice imposed on them. We want no incarceration. We don't want any murder charges, even though it's easily provable that they've been sacrificing kids to Satan.
So they want the continued perpetration of the injustice. So in essence, now you've gotten to a point where under the name of, I don't hate, but I love, you're actually perpetrating injustice and evil and wickedness.
And so at one point or another, even the justice system asked the question, can you separate the person from his or her deeds?
No.
And most of the time, you can't.
Right.
Why not? How about the teacher that decided, yeah, I'm a 32-year-old woman and I want to have sex with this 16-year-old boy? She goes to jail. You can't separate her doings from her.
It's true.
It has to be punishable in her.
Correct.
And so once you get these things clear in your mind, then the theology clears up. At least in my mind, it's all clear. For those of you that love more in depth, you love your theology. Here's what Ellicott's commentary has to say on the verse. Let the basis of your character be an intense hatred of evil and as strong an adhesion to good. Barnes notes on the Bible, the word abhor means to hate, to turn from, to avoid. In other words, all we can do, according to Barnes, is retreat. Matthew Poole's commentary, Abhor that which is evil. Do not only avoid it, but hate it. And that as hell itself. The simple verb imports extreme detestation and is aggravated by the composition.
Right.
Now, I hear one commentary, one theologian saying, just stay away from it. And I hear another one saying, no, you have a responsibility to do something about it.
Right.
On this, I land Ephesians 5:11. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness. That's the first part, avoided. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them.
Yes.
So it's not just a matter of, I'm staying away from evil, I'm staying away from bad things. You have the obligation to expose them. If you really are walking the Christian walk, you just can't go, well, I can't say a thing about it because then I'm not walking in love.
But that's what they will
Hate
consider.
evil.
But that's what modern Christians will consider loving.
Exactly.
Loving. That's
But
what they
this
will
is
call
why
it,
we're
loving.
tackling the issue. And I know we're gonna take some flack over this. We're gonna get some criticism. But go to your Bible, read Romans 12:9, and tell me what you want to do with the part that says hate evil.
Here's a couple of texts we were talking about earlier. You mentioned it earlier. Genesis 27:41. So Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father blessed him. Christians will read that and say Esau was a detestable individual. However, we look at Malachi 1:3. But Esau I have hated and laid waste his mountains and his heritage for the jackals of the wilderness. This is God speaking through the prophet Malachi. But then you've got Christians whom, again, start tying their logic into knots because of the popular Christian teaching on not hating. Well, that's God. God can do it. So God wants us to be like him through the image of his son, because Paul says that Christ is the express image of the Father, and Jesus himself said it. The disciples, show us the Father and it'll be sufficient. I have been with you all this time and you do not yet know me or see me. So Jesus is the express image of the Father. They're one and the same. So we have God here, who Jesus is part of the Godhead. He's part of the triune God, saying that he hated Esau. Interesting.
So maybe God is evolving, Gio. Maybe.
But then God
maybe,
isn't perfect.
Maybe, exactly. I'm
You
being
see?
sarcastic
But
here.
exactly.
Maybe God is evolving and now he no longer hates. That could be it. That's the trick right there.
The tension you're bringing forth in your sarcasm here is a great highlight, because now you only have two options. Either we have a misunderstanding and an intentional misinterpretation and even sanctimonious misinterpretation of hatred, or God is wrong. Those are the only two options when you think upon this biblically and logically. And I, for myself, and I know for yourself, I don't mean to speak for you, but we've had conversations on this matter over and over again, even before we led up to this live stream. It becomes very evident to us that the modern Christian interpretation of hatred is so misguided, is so unbiblical, that it warranted for us to visit it again and to explain this so that the audience would get how you've been misled on this topic. You're not any less, I'm sorry.
There's something wrong with your Christian walk if you see evil and you don't hate it.
Correct.
Let me just be very blunt about that.
Correct.
There's something very, very wrong. You have embraced a lot of error if you see evil just doing its thing and you go, if you don't hate evil, there's something wrong with your Christian walk. I apologize again. But sometimes it's just too much. The amount of garbage that is being thrown at Christians, and Christians are gobbling it up like they're getting the finest meals. It's just too much sometimes.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned this. I'm going to go back to one example I used earlier, because you'll notice in the thumbnail that we placed here that there is this, in comic book format, of course, this Christian who was running away from a mob of atheists, communists, LGBTQers, Antifa, what have you. And I find it interesting because years ago, people like us, we were denounced by scores of Christians for preaching this message, in essence, for teaching this. And we were warning Christians, if you continue to tolerate under the guise of we're showing love to these people, this evil, these very same people are going to come for your souls. Well, I hate to bring up that instance again, but guess what? Charlie Kirk thought that he could converse in good faith with his opponents, and he suffered death because of it. They killed him for it. Folks, this is the naivete that even moves through Christian circles, which frankly is not only ironic, it's baffling to see that Christians are this deceived and blinded to the realities of the world. And one of the things that has actually done a great disservice to Christians and to Christianity in the West in general is this softening of the biblical language, which adds, as it were, a layer of protection for Christians. But we've stripped it away, thinking that we are holier than God in some way, shape, or form. Because let's face it, what propels these teachings is self-righteousness. It is virtue signaling. It is sanctimony. I go back to what John Piper has taught, and he has never renounced. He said, if I'm to love my enemy, if somebody is breaking into my house to rape my wife, then I guess I have to let him do it, because I can't defend myself, because that's not showing him the love of Christ. If that's the love of Christ, then I don't want to be a Christian. But I say that with confidence because we know what the text has to say, and there's been a misinterpretation on these things. One more point. I find it interesting that these very same Christians whom have embraced these very same ideas will say, boy, Jeffrey Dahmer, I hate that guy. Adolf Hitler, I hate that guy. They have no compunction. They have no withholding of that outpouring of a righteous sentiment, what I would call a righteous sentiment in cases like those and others. But then they've got someone locally whom they work with, whom they know, who does just as equally detestable things, and yet, nope, I can't have that same hatred for that person, even though they're doing quite wicked things. And even in many instances, it's family members. But since they're family members, we have to overlook that issue. You begin to notice the inherent contradictions in this. And there, in and of itself, that also requires maybe a whole nother episode. But that in and of itself also is an enabling of evil that Christians have to take a second look at, because as for us, we don't want to be held as co-participants in the enabling of evil under the guise of, I don't want to be considered a hating person.
Gio, I've heard Christians say, at the end, Satan himself will be forgiven.
I have heard that also.
And you ask yourself, wait a minute. After all the evil, all the harm, all the suffering that God has allowed to take place, patiently waiting for people to come to Christ. After all of this, Satan is redeemable? What are you saying? I have no problems hating Satan.
None.
Well, I don't have a problem hating Satan either. Then you and I, my friend, are now in agreement that there is a place for hate in the Christian walk.
Yeah.
But when you decide, or some preacher decides, we, us, me, I decide how far we can go with this, now we have issues. Again, made in the image and likeness of God. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 through 18. Pay attention to the things that the Lord hates. Because one will say, well, it's one thing to, hate Satan, but it's another thing to hate a proud look. Well.
But this goes back, and I know you're going to make mention of it, but it's important to emphasize it for the sake of the audience tying these things together in their own mind. When he talks about a proud look and hands that shed innocent blood, isn't he also talking about the person that engages in these actions?
How can you separate the actions from the person?
Well said.
If you separate the actions from the person, then we must conclude that actions do themselves. Nobody does them.
Yep.
Well, no, there's evil in the heart, and it's carried out. In what heart? Oh, so now we're getting to the epicenter of the whole situation. There are people that enjoy evil. They just get a kick out of evil. And you are telling us that we have to sit here and go, separate the deeds from the deed doer. Just do something so that maybe give them some training, psychological schooling, therapy, where we'll separate the evil from him. But no, don't punish him, please. Please, let's just love him into change, okay? Check this out, friends. Proverbs 6, 16 through 18. These 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to his soul, says one version, or to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil.
Yeah.
So God hates these things.
Yep.
They're an abomination. And what does he do? He does absolutely nothing. Well, no, he sent his son And he is demanding that all people, no matter where you are, you repent, because if you don't, he's going to take care of business and eliminate these things. So, in my mind, Gio, and in closing, I have no problems whatsoever in understanding, in stating, and in walking in the following. There is a place for hate in Christian walk.
Yes.
I am commanded to hate evil,
Yes.
not just to stay away from it myself, but to denounce it. Read once again Ephesians 5:11 when you get the chance, and you will see that it's there. I must rebuke it. I must expose it. I must talk about it. If I see men trying to participate in women's sports, I'm going to go back to that example. I have to denounce that. I just can't go, well, we'll just let the heathen and the sinners take care of that and we'll stay out of it, okay? No, that's not the way it works. You are and you will bring this up on Sunday, the salt of the earth, the light of the world. When are you going to shine? Have you lost your saltiness?
Yeah.
So you have to hate these things. And what I ask you, my friend, if you call yourself a Christian and you don't hate these things, if you don't denounce these things that you say you hate, what are you truly saying?
Right.
At the very least, you have this abhorrent indifference to these things, and maybe even an affinity
Yes.
with some of the evil things that are happening. And so therefore, you decide, yeah, I like that new teaching on love and no hate here, and we shall call out no one, and we will impose our faith on no one. I kind of like that, when in reality, behind the scenes, you have this indifference at work, and maybe even an affinity with evil and for evil.
These are the sorts of things that, when one considers them dispassionately and in a biblical context, you begin to cut away from what the mainstream teachings are on the matter, based on the ulterior motives of the Rick Warrens of life and others, whom they just want people to manipulate. They want people to influence. See, our purpose here on Irrespective, and it has been for the longest time, is to cut through all of that crap and to give you the truth, so that you would be in liberty, you would enjoy Christian liberty, and not have these pangs of conscience over what these people, whom they have their reasons, of course, mostly for filthy lucre and other reasons, but they want you to think this way. But at the same time, when you think about it, these are also the very same people whom do a disservice to the gospel, because they are neutering. And I know Jesus uses another terminology, but I'm using this one. They're neutering the power of the gospel, because what they end up doing is that they make it, in essence, ineffective. No, Gio, I don't believe that. Nothing can make the gospel ineffective. Then you're contradicting Christ. Because Christ himself tells the Pharisees, he tells the Jews, you with your traditions, you basically annul the power of the gospel.
Yep.
Think about it, folks. If the gospel is the power of God for salvation unto man, and you begin to alter it, what do you think happens to the original product? It becomes corrupted and it doesn't work. Come on, let's not be foolish about this. Let's not virtue signal. Let's not be sanctimonious. This is why I have no qualms or trepidations in my own mind, that when I see a person who engages in evil, I hate the person and I hate the sin. So then some of you will ask, where's their space then for salvation? Here's the key. You understand that you were there at a given point. And that person needs Christ. And this is where the love of God, and this is where Christian love demonstrates itself, where you minister to that person, presenting them with the gospel. But here's the thing, and this is another line of demarcations that Christians have forgotten about. They happen to think that suddenly, when salvation comes to a person whom is a criminal or whom has done something wicked, that suddenly absolves them with respect to the humanity, or the aspect of humanity in it. Jesus tells John, and I encourage you all to look it up in the gospel. John the Baptist says, who am I, and I'm paraphrasing, to baptize you? I need to be baptized by you. Jesus says, let all righteousness be done, the one in heaven and the one on earth. Yes, we are citizens of the kingdom of Christ. We are citizens of the kingdom of heaven. However, people's evil deeds and the intentions behind it, they have to go punished, because otherwise you have a corrupting influence in society which only degrades further and further. You see it in Genesis, you see it throughout the Old Testament, you see it in the New Testament, you're seeing it in our day and age. Why? Because Christians, being the salt and light, they have lost their taste, if I can use that word, I guess pun intended. They have lost their taste for righteous hatred, rightfully directed against evil, to the point where it brings them a revulsion against the people that enact it and against the act themselves, which has led us to a place where we've allowed the modern pulpit to convince us, no, you shouldn't have a revulsion to these things. And what does the salt and light do? The salt actually becomes insipid, like Jesus warned about, because we have forgotten these basic concepts and have allowed these charlatans from the pulpit and others to confuse us and to make us think that we're less than, because we adopt the Christian way of thinking and not their way of thinking.
Romans 12:9 is very clear. If you're going to love, make it sincere, no hypocrisy, don't fake it, make it genuine. When you see evil, hate it. When you see the right thing being done, love it. It's very clear. It's black and white. There are no gray areas in these things. And once you see evil activity, you ask yourself, does evil just go about by itself? Nobody carries it out. Nobody's doing these things willingly. Of course they are. Yeah, but some people are duped into doing evil. I think people can be duped into doing wrong things. We have been talking about, and we are talking about, evil. When you talk about evil, you are talking about something that is dark, that is satanic. And when a person has moved on from doing the wrong thing to moving evil, you must ask yourself, how much can I separate the deeds, the evil deeds, from the person doing them?
Yeah.
And you'll find that once it's in the heart, unless that person decides to come to Christ, you're dealing with an evil person.
Exactly. Folks, that's what we have for you on this edition of Irrespective. Might I remind the audience that we would encourage you, if you have not done so yet, to subscribe. Whether you're watching us through X, whether you're watching us through YouTube, whether you are watching us on Rumble, if you have not yet subscribed, we would encourage you to hit that follow or subscribe button. Also, click on the notification bell to be alerted as to when we will go live again, which, by the way, we go live pretty consistently. Wednesdays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sundays, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is our regular weekly schedule. And also, click on the thumbs up. It helps the algorithms pick up the organic interest, and then they'll begin to suggest our content to others. We would also remind you to donate. It helps us to continue to put out this content for your edification. If you've heard any of our editions for some time now, you know that we are swimming against the grain, but that's been a characteristic of Irrespective for some time now. Even when we used to be Living Word Live, that has been our modus operandi. We are swimming against the grain. There's not a lot of people who are going to teach you these things because it's not beneficial to their popularity and their bottom line and things of that nature. We're not interested in that. We are interested in telling you the truth. So we would encourage you to donate. It helps us to continue to put out this content for your edification. There's a QR code that appears on the screen right now. You can scan it with your phone to be directed to PayPal's website. Conversely, you don't have a phone available to you at the moment, there's a link in the description box beneath. Simply click on it. It's under patronage and donations, and you can process that donation and patronage right now to help us out. We greatly appreciate and are thankful for the financial support that we continue to receive from some of you. If you have not donated, we would encourage you to do so for the first time on this edition. And also, lastly but not least, don't forget to share our content. It helps us to spread the word to others.
Evil appreciates indifference.
Yes, it does.
And that's what the Christian walk of many believers tantamounts to, indifference. Exactly. And evil just has a free reign.
Exactly. That's all the time we have left for this edition. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your week. We will gather again on Sunday. That's the next stream, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, for the next edition of Irrespective. For Jesus, this has been Gio. Until the next occasion that we gather, may the Lord shine his face upon you.